Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and get started on our webinar today. Again, this webinar is on 5 quick tips for manufacturing. The company putting this on is Accent Software Inc. Myself, I'm Ben Baxter with Accent, one of the co-owners, and we'll jump into a quick agenda for today's session. So what I want to cover today will be, one, an introduction. Who am I? Who are we? What do we do? And then we're going to go into the actual webinar itself for the 5 quick tips. So that we're not wasting anybody's time, today's quick tips will be around inventory control, MRP, MPS. What do those letters mean? What does that mean to our company? So we're going to talk through some of that. Then we're going to get into time studies, why they matter, what's the impact of that on our business. Then we're going to talk about KPIs, or key performance indicators. How should we be getting that data? What should we do with that data? How does that data help us drive decisions going forward? So those will be one of our tips. Then we're going to talk about the user experience and their efficiency using software. And then the last bit we're going to talk about is communication. How do we improve internal and external communication, whether that's with our customers, our vendors, or our internal different departments or business units within our company? So if those quick tips don't apply to you, feel free to drop off at this time. I won't be offended by that, but that is the topics for today's session. And I will be going into each of these in a little bit more detail before we actually get into how do we use technology today to solve some of these topics. So with an introduction, myself, I'm Ben Baxter. I am one of the co-owners of Accent Software. I am a faith-based person. I am a Christian, and so what I try to do is live my life with high values and run my company with the same high values. So that's just a little bit about me. My family there on the right, I'm actually the tall guy there in the back, so that is who is talking to you today. And then I went to Butler University, go Bulldogs. Unfortunately didn't make the tournament this year, but still had a great experience there, grew up with a business and finance degree from there. So the way I apply, the way I work with our clients is through a business mindset and understanding not just the operational side, but also the financial impacts of our operational business, and use that to drive our efforts and discussions with our clients. So a little bit about our company. We have a pretty long history with the software we sell and support today, which is Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. We will get into that software later in the presentation, but I wanted to give you a quick rundown of what we've done with that software. So I'm actually the second generation in the business, the first generation being my parents, and they ran a company that was called Computer Counselors. And they were one of the first partners in the US that signed on to distribute and support this software all the way back in the early 90s. And they were one of the top ranked partners here in the US, and eventually was acquired, and they spun up a second business called Cost Control Software. So our history with this software dates back over 25 years at this point. And so we've had several iterations of the businesses, 2 of which are still present today. But our current company, Accent Software, is very client focused. So we specialize in manufacturing and project-based businesses. And we'll talk about what does that mean. So industrial equipment manufacturers, large pieces of machines, metal fabricators, so potentially small products, spec-based products, things that require some engineering, some machining time, different materials, maybe some subcontractors. Those are all things that we work with and help clients with. So if you fit into any of these categories, great. If you don't, have a discussion with us, because we can't list every single industry we work in. As long as you're making a product, we are probably a good fit for you. That is our specialty with how we apply technology to business requirements today. So now we're going to jump into the actual meat of this presentation, which is the 5 quick tips that we see manufacturing either falling short or having a big need, a pain point related to their business and what the technology or the software or whatever tools they're using doesn't necessarily always work for them. So the first one being inventory control. So inventory control is a big topic, right? So it's all items, and whether we make them, we buy them, we fabricate them, whatever the case may be, there's always questions around how do we control that. And so there's a big push in the market right now for lean inventory. And when you do lean inventory, you have to have a lot of data at your fingertips to make sure that the product gets there on time so that you can manufacture it on time. You have to know how long it takes to build it. So we use technology to answer the 5 W's and the how, right? So what is it that I need to make? So what finished goods do I need to make? And then why? So what is the demand driving the decision to make that? Is it based on a stock level that I keep enough stock on shelves that we can ship out the same day? Or am I in a make to order, make to engineer type environment? So what is the why behind what I need to make? And the third one being where. Where do I need to make it? So if I have multiple locations, and this one doesn't necessarily apply to everybody, but if I have multiple locations, where's the most efficient place for me to make it or store it so that I can deliver it to my clients on the West Coast or the East Coast or in Canada or worldwide, right? So there's a question there on where should I make it and why? And that could also be, do I make it internally or do I sub it out to a contractor who can deliver it faster based on our current overloaded capacity, right? So different questions there around the finished good. And then the fourth W being when. And this is where lean manufacturing, if you're trying to move to this, is critical. Because if I'm in a lean environment, I don't want inventory sitting on my shelf for 3 months before I get a request for it. I want the product to be on the shelf the day before I need it, or maybe a little threshold there, 3 days, 7 days, so that we don't have a lot of shelf time of the product before it goes out. And so the when is really, really important. Now the when on the finished good is almost as important as the when on the components. So if I have a build time of 1 week, I want my products, the raw materials that I use for each stage in that build to come in probably the day before, if not a couple days before, to give myself a cushion. But what is it that I need to make my finished good, and when do I need to have it here? So the same 5 W's apply to the components just as much as they do the finished good. And so we use technology to answer these questions. And there's a lot of different data sources. You've got all the different sources of supply, the different sources of demand, all the requirements around who am I going to buy it for? What is their lead time? What does it take for handling time when product comes in the door before it's actually usable? Is there a QC step involved? Is there a QC step at the end of the process where I have to do an assessment of the product or analyze that it meets the client's specifications? So there's a lot of moving pieces or factors that have to be taken into account. It's not an easy job to be a planning, purchasing type person that has to factor all these in. But if you're utilizing technology, then it becomes easier. Not easy, but easier, right? So there's still a lot going on. You still have to be able to make decisions, but you should have the data brought to your forefront so that you can make decisions based on it and control the outcome, right? The systems don't run the world here. We're humans, we're the ones making the decisions, but we're utilizing technology to make those decisions easier for us to make. Okay, and the last one, how to make it, we'll go into discussing that in terms of the system and how we control that as well. The next of our tips, and understand I'm going to go through a couple PowerPoint slides here to build some understanding of what the concepts are, and then we're going to jump into the actual software and see how technology can make this stuff a reality for us. So time studies. Time studies are really, really important. If I'm doing paper-based time tickets, or I have a time clock, or I have machines that can communicate that to me, I need to be doing time studies. Not all the time, but if I'm trying to really watch what is my standard cost. Well, if my estimate on how long it takes me to build it is off, my standard cost is going to be off. If I'm in a make-to-order actual costing environment and I have no clue how much time it's actually taking to build it, then I don't know if I'm actually making money or not. So time studies are a really big, important part of the system. But again, you got to be able to have tools that make this easy to figure out. So if I'm doing time studies on just paper-based tickets, then I'm going to have a hard time of really gathering that information in a fast enough amount of time to make a decision and have that be impactful. Oftentimes, if we're doing paper-based studies, by the time we've studied it, something has changed. We've bought a new piece of machine. We have staff turnover. There's changes that happen that impact that. So being able to do that efficiently matters. And the last little point on here is scheduling. If my time studies are wrong or I haven't done a time study, I don't know if my schedule is accurate at all. And when I'm trying to get into a capable to promise type scenario or estimate when something will be done, and my actual time that we're devoting to a build is based on numbers that are just plucked from air, I'm going to have a real hard time scheduling that out and keeping everything accurate. So we're going to show you some tools that make that easier and make a big impact on the business. Next is KPIs and leveraging data. So this is all about big data. And some of you may have heard the term Internet of Things or IoT. What that is just a machine, typically a production machine or a piece of equipment that can send data based on what it is actually doing. So think of a injection mold machine. And as it is recording the temperature that whatever the material is that is going through it is being heated up to, what is the cycle time of that machine, what is the output or the pressure being done. The machine is tracking all that information. Now, the more sophisticated machines will be able to send that data somewhere. And so what we want to do is we want to utilize those machines and the capabilities of capturing the data without a human involved. Now, the question is always, are machines taking over, right? The answer is no, they're not. But we can automate the process. So if the machine can give us the data in some format, we want to automate the ability to retrieve that data, have it go straight into our system and update our production orders and our work orders so that when our activity is tracked in that kind of detail, we don't have a person keying in the data. We have a person reviewing it, but we don't have someone keying it into the system. So we typically get a much faster real-time account of what's happening, as well as more accurate information. We don't have someone miskeying a 10 as 100 or 15 minutes of time as 150 minutes of time. So we get a much better focus on the data going into the system. Now, why does that matter, right? So this is about KPIs, so key performance indicators. This is taking that data and doing something with it. And so when we talk about that, we're going to show some business intelligence tools that allow you to take data and mine it for information. Because what we want to do is we want to have the correct focus. And I'll talk a little bit about this first. If I think that I have a product and it's my favorite product and I want to sell it to everybody, but it's not one of my winners, and I don't know that because I don't have a data to support it, it's just I really like that. Well, I don't have the correct focus, and I'm not going to get the positive results I want. So using data to let me know what are my high margin items that we can produce very efficiently that I can sell. Now I have to still have a market to be able to sell it into, but if I have high margin items that are sellable, they have a market for them, I want to focus on those first. You want to identify your winners and you want to go after that. Chase the money and have a focus that's going to get you the most positive result. And then the flip side of that is, how do I fix the losers, the products that have very thin margins? Is it a process problem? Are we not putting the sales effort to it? What is causing those items to be the losers in my portfolio of products? So we want to have a correct focus and we want to use data to get that focus. We don't want to just like a product because we like a product. We want to like a product because the data supports it driving our business forward. And so that's a big aspect of KPI and leveraging this data. If we're using technology correctly, we've got a lot of data coming to us, and now we have to be able to work through it and make decisions on it. All right, so next up, user experience. We talk about technology and we talk about tools and software. Well, if I have software that's very capable of doing production tracking and time tracking and business intelligence and mining data, but it's not very easy for my users to use, then I'm going to have turnover. And there's a very, very high cost of turnover in terms of training someone new. And oftentimes the trainer was trained by somebody else that was trained by somebody else. And if you've ever played the telephone game, there's a loss of information. And so you have the fourth person in line that isn't very efficient in the way they use the software because they've been trained by somebody who was less efficient than the person that trained them, that was less efficient than the person that trained them. And so when we talk about the user experience, it has to be something where people are excited. It's easy to use. They can get information very quickly. They can respond to client calls very quickly because it's easy to use. And that's why we focus on making a system that is very, very user-friendly so that you don't have people leaving because the software you're making them use is really tough for them to do their job. We want people to be efficient. We want them to be happy in their job. Okay, so the second part of that is bad throughput. So maybe they stick around, but boy, they're really slow. And that could be because the software, I have a production piece of software and it tracks material and costs and machines. But I have a separate piece of software that tracks my sales and my customers. And I have another piece of software that tracks my purchasing and my vendors. Well, being able to have those seamlessly integrated into one package eliminates duplicate entry, eliminates human mistakes. You get better customer support. So there's a big factor in terms of the customer experience. So user experience has a direct relationship on customer experience. And if you have a bad user experience where it's difficult to get to the data you're capturing, you're going to end up delivering a bad customer experience because you can't answer questions on what does this cost? If I buy 20 of those, what does it cost? If I order this today, when can I have it by? If I can't answer those questions very quickly and have my users able to answer those questions without some kind of tribal knowledge, then I'm not delivering the best customer experience, and that's oftentimes a direct relationship to the user experience and what tools are available to them. So we'll cover some of that as well. Last little bit on this is internal communication and external communication. So like I said, the customer experience is oftentimes directly related to the user experience. And so we want to focus on how we can streamline those channels of communication internally from business to the business unit to business unit. So my production people talking to my planning and purchasing, talking to my sales, talking to my customer service reps, and how they can look at the production data very seamlessly from wherever they are in the system and respond to that customer's request. If I'm talking to somebody on the phone, I better be able to tell them where their product is in the production process or when we might have product available to ship to them. Okay, and so that internal communication, having that really strong, allows me to have a strong external communication. If my production and my sales are talking really well together, then oftentimes my sales are talking even better to their customers and keeping the customers excited so that those orders keep coming. All right. So we talk a lot about these tips and areas to focus our business on. Well, how do we do that? Well, for us, we're technology people. And the technology we use is a Microsoft product, and it's called Microsoft Dynamics 365, and the extension of that is Business Central. And so it, for a long time, was called Microsoft Dynamics NAV, or Navision, if you've been way back in the time there. But the software is Microsoft Dynamics D365 Business Central. There are more than probably 100,000 customers. So this is a slightly dated slide, but probably over 100,000 customers using the software at this point. Now that is worldwide. This is a very global product. And so that means there's upwards of probably 1.8 million users that are using the software. And so when we talk about stability and functionality and a global reach and the ability to adapt and work with all kinds of different industries and businesses, that's the mark, right? So this is a very, very global, user-friendly, industry-specific, if you have the right tools in place to meet your needs. So that's what we're going to jump into and show off some of the software today. So I am going to be using the cloud environment. I will mention that this has a full on-premise environment as well. So if I have any reservations about the cloud and keeping my data on a hosted server, you don't have to worry about that. It does have an on-premise version as well, so you can install it on your server. But I will be using the cloud environment, and with that I'm going to be using the browser interface or the browser client for that. So I do not have this software installed on this machine that I'm using. It is actually up in Microsoft's Azure platform. So that will be what we use for today's meeting. Now when we talk about the very first point, inventory control, okay, we're talking about items. And I have to have control of my items, and this is a fun topic for me because I love control. And so that is exactly what software gives you, is the ability to control what happens with your data. And as people order product, as I buy product, I have technology tracking all of that. So if we go and just take a quick look at an item list, and we'll go ahead and we'll scroll down a little bit. We'll go down to some 3,000 number items so that we can see some product and what it's about. So I'm coming down to my finished good. So I have several different items in my system, but this is one of my finished good items. So it's fairly generic in terms of what I call it. So I call it finished good. But I have a picture of what it is. It's a little piston. And I have control over the replenishment. So in this case, the way I replenish this is through a production order. And then in this item's case, it's based on a stock level. So if I come down to my planning tab of this specific item, I have a fixed reorder quantity. When I get below stock of 20, so either at or below 20 on hand, the system will tell me to make 50 more. The system doesn't automatically make 50 more. Again, remember, machines are not taking over. We still have the control, but the system will make a recommendation for me to make 50 based on us falling below a reorder point. Now that is just one scenario of this particular item and its reorder policy. So if we go ahead and look over at another item here, so this is another one. Oh, I have the same picture on it. Oh, there it goes. So in this case, I have a tube assembly, and this one has a reorder replenishment policy of assembly. So this is a faster build item. I have a tube, I have a little connector piece, and I have a little clip on it to lock it in place. So this is a faster build item, and so we build it to order, where it's a kit. If people are familiar with the term kit, that is what an assembly is to us, where we make this item because we have an order for it. It's not based on stock levels, it is based on orders. So I have a policy for that. And then we'll look at one more item. So this is a large make-to-order panel, okay, electrical control panel. So it is, again, a production order. So we're making it through machines and metal fabrication and electrical installs and all kinds of different processes, but it's only based on orders. So I will not stock this item. I will only make this item when I have demand for it. Now, that sounds easy enough as long as I have data to support that. If I'm trying to track all of my different items and whether I have them in stock or not, and what the different orders are and the purchases that we're making for the components, if I'm trying to do all that through Excel, or through some other standalone piece of software. There's just too many factors to make that efficient. And so we want to have technology come and make that decision for us, and not really make the decision for us, but to help us make that decision, right? All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to pull up our planning worksheet. And so this is a page that allows us to do this fairly complex calculation. And again, this is one of those processes that is not easy. If you don't have a system that can generate this calculation for you, you're probably spending hours, if not days, every single week trying to figure out exactly what you need to make, and you don't do it that often because it's such a complex process. Where if I have a system that has a very strong engine behind it, I can come in, give it a planning horizon, so that would be typically the next day out, and then sometime in the future that encompasses my lead times, and have the system say, look at all the different supply, look at all the different demand, and give me a suggestion on what it is I should make, who I should buy raw material from, what subcontractors to use, all these different factors that come into play. So what the system's going to do is it's going to go item by item, and we automate this as much as we can. So in this case, I have 2 items that I have some bad data on. Oh, and one of them happens to be one of the items we were looking at. But I'll still get some suggestions in here. And so what the system is going to do is it's going to say, hey, you should make these items, or you should purchase these items in these quantities based on what it is you're trying to do. And so because I have these suggestions, I can then review this and then make a decision on whether to actually do it or not. Okay, and there's a lot of factors that come into that we're not going to jump into for today's session. But in terms of, boy, my environment's a little sluggish today. But what the software has done is it's made suggestions for me. It has told me, here's what you should do based on the different data sources that we have in this system. So again, it has looked at all my supply, all my demand for my items, and it says, here's the purchases you need to make. And it would have told me to make the other items as well if I had set that item up differently. So I get the decision here, right? So I get to come in, review what suggestions it has made, and of course adjust information. So if I need to buy from a different vendor, if I need to change the quantity. Now, if I'm going to change something here without trying to get into training on MRP, there's some other factor that's wrong. I have a data set up wrong, so I need to adjust that rather than constantly adjusting my decisions. I want the system to make the exact same suggestion that my planner would make, assuming the planner's making the right decision, right? So if my planner says, I would have bought 100, and the system comes in and suggests you should buy 100, then I've got it set up right. And it's now enabling me to make those decisions based on just reviewing the information. Rather than doing the calculation myself, I can now trust the system and have it help me facilitate getting product where I need it, on time, and in the right quantity to make my builds and to deliver product on time to my customer. Okay, so that's kind of the inventory control side of it. Again, a lot of flexibility in terms of the decisions on, do I make it, do I buy it, what quantities, when do I need it, where do I need it. All of those factors are answered when we use technology to siphon through the data and pull out the decisions we need to make in order to carry out our business and make good decisions on what we're doing. Okay. So the next bullet point after inventory control was on time studies. And how important are time studies? Well, let me just tell you that we've worked with a lot of customers, and a lot of big topics lately have been around scheduling. Well, scheduling only works if the data that you're scheduling on makes sense. So if I know a process takes 4 hours, then I can schedule that. But if I don't know that the 4 hours is accurate, it actually takes me 6 hours. Well, every time I plan that operation to happen, I'm 2 hours late. And every operation after that is also 2 hours late, assuming they're not being scheduled with wrong data as well. So scheduling is impacted by that. Costing is impacted by that. Something that takes 6 hours costs more than something that takes 4 hours. And so my standard cost could be off, and that throws off my variances and what actually happens and what I'm reporting on and what my margins are. So there's a big focus right now on doing time studies and improving the way that people record this information. But I'll tell you, again, without technology, doing a time study is very difficult. Unless I have somebody literally writing down the start time, writing down the finish time, writing down the output that they did on every single step, it's a tough process to get an accurate time study. So what we suggest is using technology, and there's a lot of it out there to feed into it. So what I'm going to do, I'm still going to feed data to my Business Central environment, but I'm going to do it through a time clock. And again, we're just in a browser, so I'm using an application tool that sends data through the network. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scan an employee barcode that I have next to me. Maybe you heard the little beeper go. But it's just a little corded USB scanner, right? And so what it has done is there's a barcode sheet that I have in front of me. I click a button, and that clocks me into the system as that person. So I've logged in as Annette Hill, and I can now see information inside the system. So it is pulling up information about different production orders. Now in my environment, I have different windows displayed. So I can see the bill of material for this production order. As I click to different production orders, the information will change based on what is set up for those different production orders. So I like this one because it has bill of material. It has some quality measures that we have to track. Now again, I don't have to do my QC inside of the system. We strongly recommend the more you put under one umbrella, the better your technology is in terms of passing data back and forth and keeping everything connected. But if I want to track that, I can have quality measures, I can record quality results, I can have work instructions related to the specific activity. So my press department is different than my machine department. So I don't have the quality measures on my machine or work instructions, but I do on my press department. So it is pulling up the information related to the activity that is there. I can also have tools listed. This is more production level than it is task level, but I can have that information there. I can have a linked image of what that operation is about or what I'm trying to do with it. But when the person is ready, now I don't have the production order barcode in front of me, but if I did, I would simply scan my badge and scan the traveler or the barcode of that production order. Now in my case, I don't have that with me, so I'm just going to come up here and say clock on. And so what that's done is it started building up time. Now as soon as I scanned my badge, it was building time. So it's like a time attendance thing where it's calculating time throughout the day. But now I'm calculating time at 10:35 a.m. I clocked into this operation. And the system will track that. It will track what material I used, so I can record consumption of my material. I can record output for this operation. I can do a lot of information, so I'm empowering my users to not be inundated with a lot of screens and a lot of choices, but still giving them a lot of capability to record information and feed it back to my system seamlessly. So everything I do here is being tracked inside my database in terms of a time card for Annette, in terms of the production order having time allocated to it and building up that cost. If I consume some material, I'm reducing my inventory of those components. If I'm posting output, I'm increasing my quantity on hand of those goods. So I'm allowing an employee that's out in my shop floor to clock in, scan in, and be able to record that information without having to do a lot of other information. And so it's a way of just empowering your users and in the process facilitating the ability to do time studies, to find out if my time that I have in my standard matches what it actually takes me to make it. And if I'm in more of a make to order, make to engineer environment, I'm getting the actual cost it takes to build it on that production order, so I can compare, did we hit our estimate on what we thought it would take to build it, and are we going to make margin, and are we going to make money on the products we're building. So I'm using technology again, still feeding data to one data source, our Dynamics 365 database, and it stores all that information so that I can use my BI tools and my data analyst tools to pull that data out and digest it in a fast way. Okay, so carrying this on, let's talk about that next step, right? So we talked about KPIs and using data. And so when I'm inside of a Microsoft product, I have a huge advantage because Microsoft loves Microsoft. And when they love Microsoft, they include all of their tools seamlessly together in their products. So if I come down here, I have actually embedded inside this Dynamics 365 product Power BI reports. And some of you probably don't know what Power BI is, but it stands for Power Business Intelligence. It's Microsoft's business intelligence tool that doesn't have a cost. It's free, depending on what you do with it. There is a paid version of it, but you can do a lot with the free version. And they embed it inside their Dynamics 365 product so that I can pull up reports. I can go and look at the next report and see different information about different parts of my system and have it report information back to me. Or I can actually pull up the BI dashboard, so the actual Power BI dashboard where all the data is coming from and being pulled to, and I can do information with it. I can start digesting what's going on. Now in this case it's a CRM dashboard, but I can see, okay, well if I click on specific information about them, what do I want to see? Do I want to see more data about that? Or do I want to look at the overall dashboard itself and put some slicers on it, right? I can control the data. I can say, okay, for the School of Fine Art, who was the salesperson involved? What was their win, loss, and in-process sales? Who's the big winner? And what are we selling the most, and who are we selling to, right? So Peter's the one winning most of the deals, and these are the customers he's winning the most with. Who are we losing the most from? Okay, so Bart and Deborah are losing the most of their opportunities. So I can take the information and I can slice and dice it through business intelligence. Now this is pulling real-time information, right? So it is connected to my database and pulling the data right out of the system to give me these results. And so if I have, a lot of people call them data scientists or a business analysis people, they can pull data. Now you don't have to have a fancy title to do this. If I'm a sales manager, I want to be able to have a dashboard that tells me how my salespeople are doing. If I'm a CEO, CFO, I want to have information that tells me how my business is doing. And so you can build your own dashboards. It's basically like Excel on steroids, where I can build my own data points and track it and put some visual indicators on it to help me digest the information. Because we're going to be, again, capturing a lot of information with a lot of technology here. So now it's a matter of pulling the information out, making it quick to digest, quick to make decisions on. So a big part of technology is the purpose of helping facilitate decision making. And if we have data, that's great. We have to be able to digest it and make decisions on it. And so that's what the Power BI tool does, as well as embedding it within the dashboard. And I can always expand this and see the report in more detail right inside my D365 environment. I have less control. I'm looking at one of the factors within the report at a time, but I still see the same great information that I can pull information on. Okay, so there's some great tools around KPIs and doing that data analysis to help us make decisions. But again, you got to have the technology to do it. It does not make sense to try to analyze mountains of data if I don't have some tool that helps me filter it out and define the criteria that I want to make decisions on. Okay, so moving on, the next part of the quick tips was going to be on our user experience. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to close out of Business Central. So in order to show a more seamless tool here, what I want to do is what I'm going to do is I'm going to email myself. So I have a email that I have queued up from my own personal email. So this is me. And I'm going to email my demo person, the Megan B that I've been working with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send off this email. So this is a customer asking for a quote on products. So I'm going to hit send, and then in just a second that's going to pop into my inbox here. And so now Megan is receiving a request for product from a customer, right? And so without leaving Outlook, I want to create a quote and send this quote off to that person. So I'm going to come over here to my Business Central little add-in, and I can either click on Contact Insights, or I can just say, let's create a new sales quote. I mean, they're asking me for a sales quote. I don't need to look up their information. Maybe I do, and if I do, I would click Contact Insights. But I want to go ahead and create a new sales quote. So what the system does is it says, well, do we know who Ben is? And I've associated my contact with one of my customers inside of my database. And it's going to say, okay, we know who Ben is. We know who the customer is. He's listed some products. So we talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning. Well, in this case, based on what I have in my email, the system has said, hey, I found some products. I don't need this printing paper, but I found 2 products that look like they match what they're asking for. So do I want to include that? And I'll say, yeah, go ahead and include the suggested lines for me. And so what the system has done, we'll go ahead and pop this into a little bit bigger window here. What this has done is it's created a sales quote inside of Business Central to one of my customers. And it's because it came from my email. That's it. I'm not even the main customer or the main contact for that customer. I'm just a contact for the customer. But the system knows that, found the customer, created a sales quote, and filled in the lines for me. Now I still need to come in and tell it how many. So we need 10 of these, and we need 5 of these. And he even gave me a requested delivery date. I think it was May 1st, so he wants it by May 1st of 2019. And so it's going to say, do you want to go ahead and update those lines? And I say, yeah, of course. So now I've created a sales quote inside my system ready to be sent to the customer. Well, I don't have to print it to PDF or print it to paper or anything like that. I can come down and just say send by email. And it's going to ask me, do you want to archive it? And I'm going to say, no, I don't want to archive it now. But it gives me the option to say, well, we're about to send this off. Do you want to archive it? Now it has created a nice little body for me, letting me know that this is the quote number. Here's the total amount of it. I can see the PDF of the actual sales quote itself, assuming I have a PDF viewer on this computer. I did have to switch computers. But this is my email body. There is a PDF. We'll go ahead and send it, and then we can look it up in our sent folder. But I've now sent back that quote to that customer without leaving Outlook, yet I still built it inside my Business Central environment. And so we'll go ahead and close that. We can come back and see if we need to do anything with it. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up Business Central again, and I'm going to show you that same quote that we just created from Outlook without ever going into the database. So when we talk about user experience, the ability to communicate well with our customers. So I'm going to come down here to sales quotes, and we'll click on that. And here's my quote to that customer for that product. And so if I come over, I'm going to minimize my little webinar window. I can pull up that same sales quote inside now Business Central that was all created from Outlook. So we talk about a seamless integration with Microsoft products. This is it. Most of our salespeople live and breathe inside of our Outlook. And if I can have them create the quotes and have it relate to product and have the pricing be linked to the product and waterfall tiered pricing based on the customer's sales, based on the product they're ordering, based on the time of year they're ordering, all of that information at their fingertips, it's seamless. And the next part about it that's seamless is once we've got our quote and the client comes back and says, yeah, order it, well, I'm just going to come in and say make order. And as soon as I've done that, I've now created demand for those products. Now, again, it asked me, do I want to archive it? So I could archive this so that I can pull it up and generate a quote from it again over and over in the future. Now it's telling me, hey, we went ahead and created a quote. Do you want to go and see it? And I'll say yes. I don't really need to do anything with it at this point, but it has created a quote for me, an order for me based entirely on that that quote that we generated from Outlook. So without needing to do anything with it, we have created demand for those items and moved it along. Well, what does that do in terms of manufacturing? Why does this relate to manufacturing? It's faster demand generation. It's faster inventory control, where the inventory is going to see that there's a new source of demand. It's going to calculate, well, is this going to fall below my reorder point at this point? Suggest more? Is it going to be based on the system being ready to go with new raw material orders, or my capacity planning and scheduling? What's going to need to happen? So by seamlessly communicating that information, I've streamlined the process. So our shop people have a nice interface through the time clock. Our salespeople have a nice interface through their Outlook. Same thing can be done on the purchase side. So if I'm a purchasing agent and I'm inside the database, I can create a purchase order and email it right out of here, or I can be in my Outlook and managing the invoices as they come in for my payables. So the system is fully seamlessly integrated with all the other common Microsoft products that you're using. So there's a great synergy in terms of the user experience, being able to access information and communicate seamlessly through all parts of the business without even having to leave Outlook if I don't want to. Okay, so a really, really strong component there. Last little bit I'll get on would be the communication piece. That was a big part of it. There's also internal tools called notifications, where we can send what we consider instant messages, basically, back and forth to our different internal resources and have them generate a request linked to a specific record. So if I have a sales quote that I need somebody else to see, if I have a document approval process, so maybe I'm creating a purchase order and I need to have that purchase approved. I don't have the approvals turned on this, but we have the ability to have thresholds in terms of you're ordering over $10,000 of material, that has to get an approval before that PO can be processed. Same thing, I can have multiple tiered thresholds. I can have it on items. When an item is created, there's an approval process. So we're generating emails just because someone clicks request approval. That's going to automatically generate an email to whoever the approver is to say you need to go and take a look at this and get more information about what they are doing. Make a decision based on the record or linked material to what they are doing. So there's a lot of tools around the internal communication that also helps facilitate the external. So what we saw was the external information there and being able to send it and have that information come up into the system, right? All right, so I've been talking here for about 50 minutes. I want to take a pause. We've kind of gone through the quick tips. I'll pull up my PowerPoint again and go all the way back to the beginning. The whole concept here is general business improvement, right? So we want to get better inventory control. We want to have better ideas of our actual time, which impact our costing and scheduling. We want to have data and we want to be able to mine it to help us make decisions. We want our people to be happy running the business for us, because we got to remember the people that are out there entering the orders, entering the sales, that are running the production side of the business out on the shop floor. Those are very important users. Even if their job is to just run a stamp machine all day long, they have a big impact on the business. And so we want to give them tools and give their supervisors and managers tools to help keep them happy and efficient at what they do. And then the communication piece of that, all aspects of the business communicating together so that we can have good external communication to our customers and our vendors so that we deliver that personal, professional customer experience. Okay, so those are my 5 quick tips. Tried to stay under an hour here so that we could open it up for questions. If you can, go ahead and fill out the question and answer section of the GoToWebinar. That'll be the best way to send in questions. And I'll go ahead and pause there and open it up for questions. If we run out of questions, then I'll say thank you for attending today. I really appreciate everyone's time. And if you have questions on this, please follow up with myself, follow up with Diane, and get your questions answered, and let's take the next steps to find out what it would take to implement some of these tools for your business so that you can use the tips and help drive your business forward with technology.